Well, it's episode 5 of In the House, and I'm so excited today to be joined by Representative Kelly Hastings. He represents District 110, Cleveland and Gaston counties. Representative Hastings, welcome to In the House.
Hey, it's great to be here, Mark.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you, and I've been looking forward to this ever since we started putting this on the schedule a couple of weeks ago, and you guys have been crazy busy in the House, haven't you?
It's been pretty busy.
Yeah,
especially for a short session, sure.
Yeah, and now you chair one of the appropriations committees, so I know that's been busy trying to get the budget where it needs to be.
Yes, and we spend a lot of our time getting individual appropriations requests, over to the speaker's staff, and so that does take a lot of time and a lot of coordination.
No doubt, and so they have said that hopefully they'll be getting that product out for you guys to look at and vote on soon. So it's amazing to me because I've been down there a little while, and this looks like it might really be a short session. And after the marathon that you had in the long session, I'm sure you're happy about that.
Well, it will be nice. And, in fact, the speaker reiterated this morning that it's going to be a short session. So I'm assuming that that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. So now it looks like you're in the House chamber, which is pretty cool. And yes. So yesterday, big doings going on in there, lengthy debate about sports betting and gambling. And at the end of the day, it did not move forward. Any thoughts about that whole thing?
Well, the first thing that I would say is I enjoy good debate. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things, we're a part-time citizen legislature. And so we sometimes don't get the opportunity to debate like the full-time members of Congress. They're full-time government employees. The
right.
Governor's a full-time government employee. But we're part-time legislators, and we're not here as long as, say, Congress is. And we're not here all the time like the governor is. So sometimes we have to compress our work, and we have to compress our comments. And there are times that, sure, everybody would love to be able to speak on each issue. Pretty opinionated people, as we are, like to exercise our First Amendment rights. But so we have to temper that a little bit, just based on the time and the nature of this citizen legislature. But it is really refreshing to hear debate. And I try to limit my debate. I speak maybe 3 or 4 times a session, depending on what the circumstances are.
Right.
But yes, a lot of debate yesterday for sure.
Well, and it's interesting that today there was a press release that came out late yesterday that the House is going to be putting together some committee work to study the possibility of expanding Medicaid, and that study work will be looked at later on. And boy, there's just so much happening down there that it's pretty amazing. What do you think about studying this issue of expanding Medicaid at this time?
Well, I tell you, one of the things that hit me, if you'll remember a few years ago, some people wanted to eliminate what was called the Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard. Mm-hmm. And this is similar in the fact that the ones who wanted to eliminate that at that time had left out the part that if we had eliminated it, the Obama administration could have stepped in and his EPA could have taken over our environmental and energy policy here in North Carolina. That's from a states' rights standpoint, that would not have been good.
Right.
I'm hearing some of the same argument here a little bit, is that if we don't do this at the state level in a conservative manner, in a fiscally conservative manner, the feds could step in and take over. And, and if they step in and take over the process, that's going to leave the states out of the decision making. And that's one thing I'm having to contemplate. And I mentioned that to our caucus yesterday. We don't want to do anything that's considered leftist or socialized medicine or anything like that. In fact, we've already transformed Medicaid. we've put our conservative fingerprint on Medicaid here in the state. So the expansion, which for lack of a better word, it would already be a much more conservative move in this state just based on the transformation.
Right.
And of course, the big concern is we never want, especially right now when leftists are in control in DC, we don't want them to step in and take over and dictate and mandate what we do.
Lord help us.
So I think it's probably wise that we at least study those different angles to make sure we do the right thing from a conservative standpoint.
Absolutely. Now, let me pull on that thread, because you're talking about fiscal conservatism. And one thing that is obvious, if you go back and look at 2008, 2009, the state was in a huge mess. The Democrats were in the majority. And I remember back at that time, I was producing a large news radio show. And there was a large sum of money. I think it was somewhere in the tune of $2 billion or so. Anyway, it was kind of like situation that sometimes we've heard that you guys have gotten more revenue than you thought you might. And so I remember having guests on our show talking about what should they do with this money. And lo and behold, they just spent it all. And next thing you know, you're seeing headlines where Governor Perdue is furloughing state employees, teachers are being laid off. And when you guys, the Republicans, won the majority in the 2010 election, came to Raleigh in 2011, you had a gigantic budget deficit to deal with. I remember, because I had to deal with a lot of these emails, the state health plan was in great disarray. The unemployment commission was in great disarray. And so here you all are with a totally different approach. Instead of let's spend all this money, you have had a conservative approach when it comes to handling our state's finances. And frankly, I think you've done a pretty good job. Can you talk a little bit about a conservative mindset when it comes to handling other people's money, which is what our tax dollars are?
Yes. And so to piggyback on what you were saying, I remember my first or second year here, I walked onto the House floor. I was still learning the process. And we were asked to vote, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was a $300 million appropriation to cover Medicaid cost overruns. So that's what we inherited. That's in 2011. That's when we were sworn in. That's when I was sworn in. That's when we took the majority. We were elected in 2010, but not sworn in until 11.
Right.
We inherited, like you suggested, massive problems. As I remind you, that $300 million appropriation that we had to make to cover the Medicaid cost overruns.
Wow.
Since then, we've transformed that. We've stopped a lot of that egregious overrun from a financial standpoint. And so we've completely set the state on a trajectory to right-size state government. We've cut taxes. People just don't realize how many taxes we've cut. And a lot of those taxes we've cut, they don't show up on a tax return.
Right.
The sales tax cut. You remember the Democrats passed a sales tax increase and said it would be temporary. Well, it stayed on and on and on. So we as a caucus back in when I first got here decided that we needed to make it temporary. So we eliminated. That's, if I'm not mistaken, that's close to $1 billion a year.
Yeah, I remember that.
You won't even see on a tax return.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've cut other taxes, the income taxes, corporate and personal, and we've right-sized state government. And I think we've done a really good job from a fiscally conservative standpoint. And listen, make no mistake about it, this Medicaid issue that we're talking about now, I just don't see in our caucus the will to do something that's leftist or liberal. I see that we're going to study this from all different angles and make a sound decision on this, but it does not look like the issues that we're discussing in our caucus are going to match right now exactly with what the Senate has done. So I don't foresee anything happening immediately.
Yeah.
Unless I've misread the tea leaves, I don't see anything happening immediately.
Well, let me piggyback on what you just said. You've right-sized state government, cut taxes. And so what we're seeing in North Carolina is huge economic development. You know, we love to read about Toyota and VinFast, but almost every week, as part of my job, I try to find good things to talk about. And there's always, you know, such and such a manufacturing company expanding, adding 100 jobs, so-and-so adding 60 jobs, so-and-so adding 310 jobs. And it just is continuing all over the state, this economic development, this economic growth. Now, I kind of peeked at some of your experience, and I know that you did a lot, chaired the transportation committee for a good while. So I'm going to ask you from that experience, when you look at all of this economic development, and it's tremendous, and that's a tip of the hat to you guys for getting our state in a position to attract businesses that will create jobs, which help families all across our state. But do you have any concerns from a transportation standpoint as you look out over the horizon and say, we've got too much going on here, or we need to build this road, or we need to do this? What are your thoughts about transportation at this time in lieu of economic development?
It's primarily a money issue. I mean, it's expensive to operate the roads in North Carolina and to build new roads. And if you'll remember, before I got here, there was what was the old equity formula, and that's where projects were just placed in a budget by a powerful person or two or whatever, however many. And so that's changed. Now we have the strategic transportation investments.
Right.
And now projects have to be submitted either by a local MPO or RPO or the division engineer. And those projects are submitted and they have to be scored and prioritized. And, you know, and if the money's not there and they don't score on those objective criteria, then the project's not going to move forward. So there's been a big, big change. Having said all that, we still have a DOT that's overprogrammed. Even with the recent money that came from the federal government, we're still, I think, roughly $7 or $8 billion overprogrammed.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that means that what that really means is the projects that are on the front end of the approved list. I'm using basic terminology it's kind of complicated, but sure. The projects that are approved, they're the ones that are going to be in really good shape. And that's what we've been working on for 12 years. Some projects are not going to be improved. And so there are going to be some people disappointed, at least in the short term, for new projects. But the ones that have come to the forefront in the prioritization and scoring process are the ones that are going to get funded first. Mm-hmm. And you know, that is a fiscally conservative move there.
Yeah.
In other words, projects that score objectively and can be funded are the ones that are going to be built. So it is primarily a money issue. Now, there are some other issues we've had to deal with over the years, a lot of red tape, especially coming out of the federal government, a lot of permitting, et cetera, that delays projects. And, you know, President Trump was trying to solve that. And then, of course, the election turned this last time, apparently, and went another way. So we don't know what they're going to do from a regulatory standpoint. But my guess is the current administration will make it more difficult. And so we have a tough regulatory environment that we might have to deal with, and the financial environment.
Gee whiz. Well, I know that there's a glaring difference between the way that you guys in the General Assembly of North Carolina view things and handle taxpayer money, you know, as compared to the folks in Washington. So I personally, as a citizen, appreciate what you guys are doing. I mean, you know, what really is funny, Representative Hastings, you hear sometimes the leftist media say, oh, these tax cuts for the rich. But what they don't tell people is, for example, the standard deduction. You guys have lowered that so many times. That helps somebody like me that doesn't itemize, right? The bigger the standard deduction is, the more that helps just average Joe like Mark Shiver out here, who would not be like in the top 1%. I know that probably, is a surprise to some people, but seriously, you are helping the working folks, the middle class in North Carolina, every time you do stuff like that. And it's a shame the media doesn't tell the truth about it.
Oh, it's a massive amount of money that gets to stay in the pockets of the people in North Carolina. So they can help take care of their family, their friends, their loved ones, their businesses, whatever it might be. So yeah, that is one huge tax cut that you don't hear a lot about, but it is. I think we raised that, if I'm not mistaken, the standard deduction is going to what, close to 25,000?
Something, yeah, it's pretty big.
So people won't pay state income tax on the first 25,000 of earnings, and that's pretty big.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So try to keep our time together not too long. And so we're going to get close to winding this up now. But one thing I wanted to ask you about was I think this is your 6th term. And so when you came here, you probably had certain things that propelled you to run in the first place. Now you're a wily veteran, so to speak.
Yes.
And what drives you to serve, Representative Hastings? What is it that makes you want to help people? And I may have stole your answer right there, but what is it that makes you want to serve?
Well, it's experience as a regular person who's had to try to deal with the bureaucracy. That is so frustrating. And it's such a good feeling to have a constituent call, express or write, generally write, email, etc., express a problem, and be able to make a call respectfully and ask to get assistance for that person, and it work out for that constituent. That is the best feeling. Wow. Because I know how frustrating it is to deal with a big bureaucracy. It can be really overwhelming and frustrating.
Yeah, it can.
So it's good to help constituents, no question.
So helping people is at the heart of why you get up and make that drive from Gaston County and Cleveland County and come to Raleigh and spend the hours and the long nights. It just comes down to helping people. That's it.
It. Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty admirable. I've always felt like you were a person of genuine integrity. I've known you a long time. In fact, when I used to write for a living, I would get, I don't know if you remember, but I would call on you for quotes on different articles that I was writing. And I've always appreciated the integrity with which you approach your service. So I want you to know I've always had the utmost respect for you, sir.
And the same for you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Well, our time is up, and I'd like to do this again because you're just great. And I think we just barely scratched the surface, but I want to thank you for being our guest today on In the House. Representative Kelly Hastings.
It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you, sir.